almost every episode of Lupin is its own little genre. So you have quite, in the first part, you have a kind of heist, then you have a prison episode, and we try and mix emotions the whole time across the show anyway.
This is obviously part 2 of Lupin. Part 1 dropped earlier this year, the first 5 episodes, and the second 5 episodes arrived recently. George, was that always the plan that you divide this first series into 2 chunks, and also kind of the second section feels slightly different tonally in that Assane Diop faces big emotional moments as well as the brilliant fun that we've been used to so far in the show?
It was a little bit, we had, there was COVID last year, obviously, while we were filming part 1. We have a part 1 and part 2 is a sort of, is the same story. It's the story of the Queen's necklace, which Assane robs in episode 1 at the Louvre. But it's also the beginning of a story about revenge to avenge the death of Babacar and to get revenge on Pellegrini, who's the great antagonists of part 1 and 2. So part 2 is a continuation of part 1. It answers a lot of the questions dramatically that we pose in part 1, and they should be seen as kind of one origin story of Assane Diop as we kind of encounter him. We did create it and write it as a 10-parter. As we were kind of in production, there was the Netflix were beginning to get this idea that maybe we drop them into chunks of 5. So as that conversation was happening, we were able to write into that, and we were able to create that cliffhanger that you get at the end of part 1. But we also knew we wouldn't be too long before we were back, so we could drop quite a hard cliffhanger. Because I think if we'd done that cliffhanger at the end of part 1 and not reappeared for 18 months, it would have been quite sort of frustrating. But we knew we were coming back soon. So the answer was a bit of both. It was kind of conceived as we were making the show, and COVID meant we had a little bit of a break, which kind of, I think, confirmed that that's the way we were going to do it.
And Isabelle, did COVID present particular challenges for the filming of the second half of the series?
Yes, absolutely. It was very hard to begin after COVID, but I think it was the same for every production all over the world, because everybody was being careful at everything, and it was not usual for us. And we were always afraid that somebody arrives on the set with COVID, so we had to take a lot of precautions to prevent that. So yes, it was very challenging.
And Omar, did you think there was in the second lot of episodes that Assane has to deal with not only just the kind of challenges that he dealt with in the first 5, but there's a real emotional undercurrent, I think, in the second load of episodes, particularly involving his son, etc., and the kidnapping. How did you find that experience of playing those scenes?
That was really, really interesting, because that's exactly what we wanted to have. We wanted to have, like, on the first part, Assane being like the master of the game, the mastermind always has a step ahead of everything. And on the second part, he's more like under his emotions. So I see that as a Assane, is playing with his mind on the first part and with his heart on the second part, and it's very interesting to see the two level of emotions and the two level of the character, because it's another side of him. You can see he's more reacting. That's why you can see it can be more violent in a second part, because he's more reacting than acting. He's not planning everything, which is more interesting and makes him more like us, and we love that. We love thinking. We were talking with George, and we were thinking about Assane being very, very smart and know exactly what he does when he's a part of stealing or robberies, but when it's about emotion and his family, it's different. He's more weak, and which is very interesting, and it makes the character more precise and interesting as an actor.
And George, in terms of writing those episodes, I think, because we're so used to, in the first part, in the very jaunty kind of fun tone of the show. When it gets into these big emotional modes, was it tough to kind of get the tone right of that shift?
Well, one of the things we worked on early on is that almost every episode of Lupin is its own little genre. So you have quite, in the first part you have a kind of heist, then you have a prison episode, and we try and mix emotions the whole time across the show anyway. So you might have quite a fun story of the week, as we might call it, where there's a sort of self-contained adventure that's going to further Hassan on his arc. But then we're always kind of counteracting that with some stuff from his youth, so the whole show is a mixture of genres. I think at the very end of part one, when Raoul is taken, and Omar and I talked about this a lot together, was that really we agreed. We actually took out some of the more fun tone in the episodes 6 and 7, because we agreed that at this point, Hassan would put aside all of his witty structural kind of planning and actually go on his gut a lot more. And at the end of the day, he's a father who hasn't got his kid, and homages to Arsène Lupin can wait while you go trying to get your kid back. And suddenly, as Omar says, you become weak because you're acting with your heart. You're not thinking with your, it's heart governing head. And all those kind of cute plans you see in part one slightly fall to the wayside for a period. Because we want that guy, we want Hassan Diop to be a brilliant superhero who can rob the Louvre without breaking sweat, but he's a real dad with real care for his kid, and like anyone else, he suddenly would be kind of thrown. So it became darker and more primal and more kind of relatable because Raoul was missing. So that sort of determined the tone, really.
And Isabelle, I wanted to mention Etan Simon, who plays Raoul, who is amazing in the role. Was it hard to find a young actor for this role? Or how did you find it?
We did a very big casting, and at the end, we had two boys who were very, very interesting, and we present them to Omar. And with Omar, we were hesitating between two because both were very, very good, but Raoul had something that the other one didn't have. So at the end of the day, we decided to work with Raoul, and yes, he's very, very good, and we are very happy to work with him. And I think it was for him a very interesting experience because working with Omar, it was his first experience on set. So he had to learn a lot, and he was discovering what we were doing. He was discovering his character. So for him, it was very new, and yes, it was surprising.
And Omar, did you have to be fatherly on set a little bit?
I always try to do, and I can't help it. I always be, because as a father, when you're around kids, you always like try to make sure that everything is fine for them. But the cool thing for all the kids we have on the show, they are like for it's like wide casting, and it's for all of them. It's a first experience, so there is something very rare and very natural that helps, and sometimes you cannot have with professionals, young actors. So which is really good. So that we could work with them and have something very, very fresh and that we can work with. So yeah, we try to make them comfortable, but at the same time we help them on the work. And for Etan, it was hard at the beginning because he's kind of stubborn a little bit, but it good because even when we were trying to make him work, and it sometimes was more difficult than others, but we build a relationship as like a father and son. So sometimes he look at me like you're boring, and you're leave me alone. And sometimes it's like father and son, and we have those kind of relationship, which is really, really cool actually, because at the end, we really, really have a kind of a bond, so which is really cool, and it helps for the show actually.